Today, we're talking about 3 films you probably didn't see, but you should have. When we talk about our favorite movies, it is inevitably the ones that have some type of mass appeal, cleaned up at the Oscars, or become quotable memes, ingraining themselves in our collective psyche. That's not what we're talking about today. Hi, I'm Mike. I love film. On every episode, I recommend 3 films that all have something in common. We'll talk about the common thread and why it matters. Today we're looking at 1981's Looker, written and directed by Michael Crichton. The Unbelievable Truth, written and directed by Hal Hartley. And Manhunter, directed by Michael Mann, based on the book Red Dragon. First up, Looker. Released in 1981, Looker is a prophetic movie. It's all about an evil corporation called Digital Matrix that has developed a technology that can scan beautiful women and use their likenesses in commercials to sell everything from dish detergent to bug spray. As if that wasn't enough, Digital Matrix then took to murdering those women, though it's never exactly explained why they must die. Today, we call that a deep fake. In 2023, SAG and AFTRA went on strike against the Alliance of Motion Picture Producers in protest of, among other things, producers' use of AI and digital recreation. The unions were afraid of this exact technology. But in 1981, Looker takes the concept one step further. Not only can Digital Matrix create lifelike images of actors and make them say and do whatever they want, they also have developed a technology to embed a hypnotic message within the doctored commercials.
Now you just watch. Warrior All-Purpose Cleaner will make short work of this.
And then there's the gun. When I first saw this film as a kid, the complexity of the plot went right over my head. But I remembered the gun. It's a futuristic type of light-emitting ray gun that renders its victims frozen in a hypnotic trance, causing them to lose minutes or hours of their lives. It also makes the wielder of the gun invisible? Okay. It seems Crichton had a thing for futuristic guns because a few years later he wrote and directed Runaway with Tom Selleck. Check out that gun. Looker was written and directed by Michael Crichton, who by this time had already written several best-selling novels, such as The Andromeda Strain and The Terminal Man, had written and directed several hit movies, including Coma and Westworld, the film that the hit HBO series was based on, and had written a pilot for a TV show he was pitching around town called 24 Hours. That project would eventually be renamed ER and be a huge hit. Looker, by all rights, should have been a blockbuster, but it fell short. It starred Albert Finney as Dr. Larry Roberts, and famed tough guy James Coburn as John Reston, CEO of Digital Matrix.
Digital Matrix does mostly theoretical research.
In its day, Looker was a criticism of the rampant video advertising taking place on the ever-expanding offerings of TV and the newly forming cable channels. What Crichton was writing as fiction in 1981 has become a very real concern in 2024. As we stare down an AI future and grapple with the realization that deepfake technology is here to stay, we have to remind ourselves that in 81, this was far-fetched science fiction. It touches very briefly on the prospect of this technology being used by politicians to sway elections and the hearts and minds of the electorate, but fails to elaborate on what the implications of that would mean. We're left with the lingering distaste of the potentiality, but not the thoughtful rebuke of the technology, as we get in Jurassic Park, for example, also by Crichton.
Boy, do I hate being right all the time.
Looker has so much potential, but rather than defeat the Pandora's box that the Looker technology has opened, it devolves into a bizarre, slow-motion cat-and-mouse game inside the television studio where deepfake commercials are filmed. It is strange that Looker envisions a world where computers can recreate believable humans walking and talking, but can't manage a static set? Come on.
I admit it, I have troubles with bugs and roaches, even in my perfect and spotless kitchen.
Funny enough, production was delayed on Looker because of, you guessed it, a Screen Actors Guild strike. Looker was a departure for Mr. Crichton. Up until this point, he had written a novel first, then translated it into screenplay form, and then directed the film. Looker was his first straight-to-screenplay project. That's not to say the story suffered because of the writing, but perhaps it fell victim to studio executive notes, who weren't familiar with the source material that existed only inside Crichton's head. There's a quote from Coburn inferring that much of his role ended up on the cutting room floor, including a scene where he explains to Finney why the women Digital Matrix scanned had to be killed. I'm told this scene ended up in a broadcast version of the film, which I've yet to track down. If you know where we can find it, please comment below. In the annals of history, Looker was forgotten as a box office miss, but I think it deserves another look as a prophetic vision of the future, which indeed came true. What do you think? Comment, let me know your thoughts below. Next up, The Unbelievable Truth. France has Jean-Luc Godard, Germany can claim Wim Wenders, but the undisputed king of misspent youth and brooding dramedy from my hometown of Long Island, and someone you probably never heard of, is the one and only Hal Hartley. The Unbelievable Truth, written and directed by Hartley, is rife with small-town drama. Josh Hutton, Robert John Burke, returns home after a stint in prison for murder. In the intervening years, the story of Josh's incarceration has grown to legendary status. In fact, no one is sure of the exact events that transpired, yet they all can agree that a man is dead, Josh must be to blame.
He's not a mass murderer. Well, that's what I heard. Mike, you're so fucking simple.
Upon arriving home, Josh gets a job as a mechanic and eventually falls for his boss's much younger daughter, Audrey, played by the late Adrianne Shelly. Audrey is a nihilistic high school senior debating between Harvard and working full-time as a model, neither of which particularly appeal to her.
They wouldn't drop a bomb on the weekend, would they?
Who knows? Could be some freak accident happens and boom, the history of human endeavor splashed down the toilet.
Their small town is filled with the usual characters, pining to be something, but stuck in suburbia doing nothing. The film pays homage to the plays of Molière and the French New Wave films, and paved the way for both Slacker and Clerks, having been shot before either of those indie classics. It benefits from a dry-witted and wickedly funny script. This was Hartley's first foray into writing, and the voice he found here would be a hallmark of his work to come. After I saw this film in the early 90s, I had to track down a copy of the script just so I could better study Hartley's method. There's one scene in particular where a young Edie Falco corners Burke in a diner, and the ensuing circular dialogue is a thing of beauty. Their conversation repeats 4 times before Hartley cuts away, giving us the relief we so desperately need. But that scene is important. It stands as a reminder that life in small towns will wear you down with repetitive drudgery if you don't find a way to break out. The movie was reviewed positively and was an official selection at both the Toronto and Sundance film festivals. After The Unbelievable Truth, Hal Hartley remained true to his independent roots and went on to make several other films, all of which carried his signature style and most of the same cast. At some point during production, Hartley's producer recommended they spend all of the $70,000 budget they raised on principal photography and find a distributor to pay for the post-production, a common practice in the indie film industry. But Hartley refused, saying that's where you lose control of your film. Not only did Hartley hold on to creative control, he also held on to the rights. Remaining fiercely independent might be why the film didn't gain a wider release. There's a benefit to selling out, I suppose, and that's exposure. Had The Unbelievable Truth been scheduled non-stop on Cinemax for the last 35 years, we might all be quoting it today. Hartley still owns the right to all of his films, which are only available on his website, halhartley.com. I put a link in the comments so you guys can go there. The Unbelievable Truth is truly a forgotten gem and a must-watch for anyone who loves independent film. Finally, Manhunter. I have to be honest, even I hadn't seen Manhunter. It was recommended by a member of our writing staff, and she was adamant that it should be included. I'm glad we did. Check out that poster. Based on the novel Red Dragon, Manhunter is the silver screen debut of one of cinema's most iconic characters, Hannibal Lecter. But before Anthony Hopkins was strapped into an upright gurney and muzzled, the role was brought to life by Brian Cox, who did an excellent job as Lecter, and in my estimation laid the groundwork for Hopkins' masterful performance. Directed by Michael Mann, hot off his executive producer role on Miami Vice, and starring 2 actors who built careers out of playing cops both on film and TV, William Peterson as FBI profiler Will Graham would go on to produce and star in the hit series CSI, and Dennis Farina, who was born with a cop's mustache permanently attached to his face, could do nothing but play cops. And oh look, Chris Elliott. Graham is lured back to the FBI after previously locking Lecter up, a feat that nearly killed him. Ooh, backstory. To catch Lecter, Graham had to think like Lecter, and that nearly drove him insane, and seemingly away from the FBI. Graham is convinced to return to the FBI to tackle another case that is sure to test his nerves, divide his family, put them in harm's way, and probably send him back to the psychiatric ward to recoup. That is, if he solves the murder. To better get a grip on the thought process of this new serial killer, dubbed the Tooth Fairy, Graham visits his old friend Lecter in his jail cell, who agrees to look at the file. As in Silence of the Lambs, Lecter is duplicitous with his assistants. He forms a mentor-like relationship with the Tooth Fairy and undermines his FBI pal by delivering his address to the Tooth Fairy, setting him loose on Graham's family. The Tooth Fairy is played by character actor Tom Noonan, a tortured, strange person, the character, not the actor. But unlike other serial killer movies, Manhunter peers inside the character of the Tooth Fairy when he begins luring in his next victim, a young blind woman. In one of the most awkward first dates ever recorded, the Tooth Fairy takes his date to a veterinary clinic so she can run her hands over a sedated tiger. While I wouldn't recommend this for many first dates, it turns out to be exactly what Cupid ordered. She becomes smitten with the Tooth Fairy. They go back to his place to watch 16mm film. Kind of rude if you ask me. She's forced to sit next to him quietly, listening to the sound of the projector as he combs over footage of his next victim. Actually, she's probably the best mate for a serial killer. What do I know? Love is strange. The entire scene we're waiting for him to strike her, to slash her, to kill her. But surprisingly, it's she who makes the first move and they end up in bed. In a moment of vulnerability, we see the killer struggling with his feelings. Maybe he turned to murder because women in society have turned against him. And just as he's about to boil over and murder again, here comes this gentle, genuinely good, beautiful woman. We see the Tooth Fairy struggling post-coital. Is he frustrated because he knows he has to kill her? Has he so resigned himself that he's a monster, that normal feelings are foreign to him? We don't really know. Unlike most movies, Manhunter peels back the psychosis and gives the killer a real story arc, and a motive that allows him an opportunity at redemption. If only for a moment, though. Before long, the Tooth Fairy stalks his new love and witnesses another man walking her home, and in a fit of jealousy, he falls right back into his old habits. In Manhunter, the hero gets a glimpse of the killer's mind, and for just a moment, the killer gets a glimpse of what normalcy is. It's an interesting display of duality. Are any of us purely good or purely evil? Surely we all lie somewhere along the spectrum. This is a theme Mann will revisit again and again, most notably in Heat with Robert De Niro and Al Pacino, a cop and a criminal who aren't so different after all.
You know, we're sitting here, you and I, like a couple of regular fellas.
From the moment this 1986 thriller begins, it's non-stop suspense. There are moments where I caught myself riveted to the forensic intricacies of the case. That's hard to keep up for over 2 hours. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the cinematography. It's a beautifully shot film. Mann's direction is superb. His camera placement and framing are among the best. At the time of its release, it was panned as being overly stylized, but watching it in 2024, it feels good. It's not as slick as Blade Runner, nor is it as flashy as Mann's other project, Miami Vice. The Chicago Tribune writer Dave Kerr remarked that Mann believes in style so much that he has very little belief left over for the characters or situations of his film, which suffers accordingly. Sorry, Mr. Kerr, I have to vehemently disagree. Other critics compared it unfavorably to Miami Vice, a criticism I honestly don't see. But I suppose Miami Vice was the biggest thing on TV at the time, and it would only be natural to compare them. Some 40 years on, I think it's safe to say that's bunk. The film was originally going to be called Red Dragon after the novel, but producer Dino De Laurentiis changed it to Manhunter after his film Year of the Dragon bombed at the box office the year before. He didn't want a repeat of Dragon movies. It opened in 1986 and grossed a little over $2 million in the opening weekend, eventually grossing a total of $8.6 million, becoming the 76th highest grossing film of the year. Kind of like saying, look Ma, I came in second to last. Retrospective reviews tend to be a little kinder. It is quite possible that it took Silence of the Lambs director Jonathan Demme, paired with Anthony Hopkins' portrayal of Lecter, to nudge an audience hungry for forensic science drama to look backwards. TV shows like the CSI franchise and the X-Files can thank Manhunter for opening the door to crime process shows. You might be more familiar with the 2002 remake, aptly titled Red Dragon. Anthony Hopkins returned to play Lecter. It starred Ed Norton as Will Graham, Ray Fiennes as the Tooth Fairy, Philip Seymour Hoffman, blah, blah, blah. That film was a box office hit and made tons of money. Most critics of Red Dragon agree that it didn't need to be remade, that Manhunter told the story better with a lesser-known cast, and that rolling out Hopkins to play Lecter for the third time, he had also starred in Hannibal, the third film in the trilogy, and giving Lecter more screen time than previously afforded in Manhunter, the character was becoming a parody of itself. I'd agree, though I have to give credit to producer Dino De Laurentiis for his persistence and belief that the story told in Manhunter could make money. It eventually did. Unfortunately, though, it was wrapped in a glossy, star-studded, schlocky Hollywood package entitled Red Dragon. Looking back, Manhunter is a stylish, beautifully shot, well-acted movie with a solid original plot, but the audience in '86 just didn't see it. As always, these are my opinions, and I'm looking forward to reading your comments below. Hint, hint. Thanks for watching, everybody.